Really pleased that my guest is Patrick Holford, who is the founder of the Institute for Optimum Nutrition, author of many amazing books, including the new one, Flu Fighters, which is his 44th. Patrick, welcome.
Uh, Good to hear you, Janey. How are
Yeah, really good, really good. It's lovely to chat to you. I had no idea you had yet another book out. Very exciting.
Well, I wrote it in lockdown.
Oh, did you? Good for you.
Yeah,
That's what I've got to do, but I haven't got there yet.
yeah.
Well done.
160 pages, 161 references.
Wow.
Did it in
Wow.
2 weeks, got it printed in 2 weeks, and it's now in every health food store.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
Brilliant
because
stuff.
they're open, so anyone can get it.
Exactly. Yeah,
And
that's good news.
it's actually gone to number 2 in nutrition in Kindle.
That's amazing. Well
Yeah.
done, you. Brilliant. So you better share some tips with us. I know you particularly want to talk about vitamin C, which I think many people are realizing is a very big factor in all of this, and yet seemingly we're not being advised. So it'd be lovely to hear
Well,
your take on it.
just to give you a little bit of background, I met in 1980 an incredible man called Dr. Linus Pauling. And Linus Pauling had 48 PhDs at the time I met him, 2 Nobel Prizes, the only man ever to have won 2 Nobel Prizes. He was the father of chemistry, really, modern chemistry, of
Mm,
molecular biology. He was the first man to work out how a gene caused disease and then how the environment can turn your genes up or down, which is the whole new field of epigenetics. Everyone knew that ether made you unconscious. Nobody knew how. He solved the riddle of the chemistry of unconsciousness, which gave birth to all the anesthetics. Einstein, when asked, "Are you a genius?" he said, "If you want a real genius, it's Linus Pauling."
mm,
And in the 1970s, he came across vitamin C. And vitamin C has been around since the very beginning of life. As soon as life starts with oxygen-based life systems, you've got ascorbic acid. It's very, very similar to glucose. And he was amazed by this simple chemical because 10 milligrams stops you dying of scurvy
yeah.
with your teeth falling out. And interestingly, actually, people with scurvy die of pneumonia, which is very relevant for COVID-19.
Yeah.
And yet 100,000 milligrams, 100 grams is non-toxic.
Mm.
And
Can I
yeah,
just pause you just for literally 1 second? Because
sure.
you say the word scurvy, and there'll be a lot of people, a lot of people in the younger generation won't even know what that is,
Yes.
because it's died out allegedly. So just remind us what scurvy is.
Well, vitamin C has about 50 functions in the body, one of which is it makes the glue, collagen, that holds our cells together. So
Mm,
in the old days when sailors went hunting for America,
mm,
etc.,
mm.
they ended up after a month or so, certainly by 2 months, with bleeding, gums bleeding, teeth falling out, getting terrible infections and usually dying of pneumonia because they had run out of vitamin C. And then someone discovered that if you had limes, this is why the sailors were called limeys, if they had limes, they wouldn't get this disease. And unfortunately, remains established in the medical profession's mind is that the only importance of vitamin C is to not get scurvy.
Mm,
And that's why we have this RDA, or ridiculous dietary arbitrary, which says you need 40 or 80 milligrams of vitamin C, half an orange, and all is good.
yeah.
Linus Pauling, on the other hand, he noticed 2 fascinating things. The first was that all animals make it, except for primates, bats, the guinea pig, and there's a couple of others as well. And that's, by the way, why the guinea pig became the guinea pig, the experimental animal of choice, because it shares our inability to make vitamin C. And
Right.
and he noticed, and I'll use a goat. I mean, right now, here we are socially distancing, but not from our cats or our dog or the sheep or the cows or the goats. All of these animals are exposed to this virus. None of them are succumbing. And the reason is they make vitamin C. If I take a goat, my body weight sized goat, quite a big goat, it actually makes 15 grams, 15,000 milligrams a day. 1 gram is 20 supermarket oranges. It's making 250 oranges worth of vitamin C. But if I expose that goat to either stress or a virus, it can increase its production to 100 grams. And this super bright man noticed this, and he noticed that animals that make vitamin C effectively don't get cancer and they don't get viral diseases, or it's pretty rare. And he then dedicated the next 39 years of his life into studying vitamin C and viruses, vitamin C and cancer. So I'm going to tell you 3 mind-blowing facts that have emerged, because I've been talking with the doctors in Wuhan, China. That's the town that is bigger than London, the city.
Yeah.
They have not had a case in their ICU intensive care unit for a month. I've been working with a man called Dr. Peng in Zhongnan Hospital. And I've also been talking to the leading professors of critical care medicine in America. And here's 3 mind-blowing facts. Number 1, every patient in intensive care with COVID-19 that they've tested has scurvy, has in most cases undetectable levels of vitamin C.
Wow.
So what we know is in the acute phase of this virus, it is consuming, expending, spending up using vitamin C, which is a profound antioxidant. And there's a lot of what we call oxidation going on. It's a profound anti-inflammatory agent. It's incredibly important for immune cells. So that's like interesting fact number 1. Interesting fact number 2 is that you don't actually die from this virus. What you die from, not you, but what people are dying from, is what we call a cytokine storm, where the immune system vastly overreacts and you get this massive inflammation. And the single best drug for inflammation is cortisone. Basically, the adrenal glands produce something called cortisol. It's part of your fight, flight, emergency situation. I was in a car crash a few years ago. The car was really mashed up, and the police very kindly took me to where I was going for dinner, and I felt fine for a couple of hours until suddenly my system shuts down. So cortisol keeps you alive. Now they have discovered 3 things. 1, the adrenal glands have 100 times more vitamin C in them than any other organ in the body. Number 2, the adrenal glands actually secrete it into the blood when stressed, when asked to do so. And number 3, if you are completely deficient in vitamin C, your adrenal glands can't work. In other words, you can't fight. And that's when people die, because the game is over. So these doctors picked up on what the Chinese were doing, because they were giving very high dose vitamin C intravenously to their acute cases. But they've been giving intravenous vitamin C together with steroids, cortisone, really, it's called prednisolone, which doesn't work very well on its own if you have no vitamin C, but together with vitamin C. I spoke to one professor, Paul Marek at East Virginia Medical School yesterday. I asked him, no, the day before, I asked him, how many people have you had now through your ICU in acute critical condition? He said 40. I said, how many deaths have you had? And he said 2. Both over 85, both with end stage other diseases. One had liver cirrhosis, the other had a very serious end stage lung disease. So these doctors are reporting close to 0 deaths in ICU. And I hate to say it, but it's the truth, because I get a report every week from the intensive care national audit team here. And last week, up to this point, the death rate in intensive care of people on ventilators is 66%. 2/3 come out dead.
Wow.
And the overall mortality rate from ICUs, ventilator or not, is 51%.
Wow. Amazing. So obviously the big question is, why isn't this already happening in the UK?
It is the big question. And I want to give you 2 other points there. There's basically what they did in China on February the 2nd, and I've made a film about this, is they shipped, and I've literally got the packing order and the truck and everything from a factory called DSM. They shipped 50 tons of vitamin C straight into Wuhan city. That is 50 million grams. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, I take 2 grams every day. I haven't increased during this pandemic. It's fine. That's what I do. I keep doing it. If I ever get a cold, I take 1 gram an hour. What they did in Zhongnan Hospital, and I believe in all other major hospitals in Wuhan, is every single hospital worker got 2 grams, 1 or 2 grams of vitamin C every day. Every single hospitalized patient got up to 20 grams a day. And that's what I do, 1 gram an hour, and then you'll have a few hours to sleep. And every person admitted to intensive care unit got intravenous vitamin C. And that's actually how they dealt with this. So your question, why are we not doing it here, is so pertinent. And that's why I am spending every single hour that I can campaigning on this. The book Flu Fighters is whizzing everywhere. I love the fact that because the bookshops are shut, the health shops are open.
Yeah.
We can support the health food shops who've got the vitamin C and they've got the zinc and they've got the vitamin D. And they now have the book Flu Fighters, which will give people the information that they need. Now, of course, we have written to everybody, I mean, so many times, and I've had personal, communications delivered to, Chris Whitty and, Sir Simon Stevens, the head of the NHS, and, everybody. And we've got a lot of doctors on our side who are outraged because the thing about vitamin C is it's dirt cheap.
Yeah, exactly.
It's totally non-toxic. There is no harm in doing this.
Exactly. I mean, I was just going to say, I even in the early weeks, a good sort of 5 weeks ago, I saw some of the reports. Even in the mainstream press, there was some of the reports about doctors in China speaking out about this. And then we read, even in the mainstream press, we read about hospitals in New York using it, and it was very briefly touched on, I think, in one of the press conferences. I remember sort of catching a note of it, and I can't remember, don't quote me on what was said, but it was words to the effect of it doesn't really work, and I mean, it was just completely poo-pooed. I can't think of another way of putting it. It really was. What is going on there?
It's worse than that. I mean, we have managed to get half a page in the Daily Mail the week before last. And I hope we're going to get some more coverage. But I've been in touch with, the Times and the Guardian, and the Express, and everyone. And there is this, I keep getting fed. I mean, for example, the BBC did a whole piece, saying it's a waste of time. And it was really funny in a way because I'm working behind the scenes with top journalists, and one of them in the Mail. The Mail wants somebody against this, right? And normally I've got lots of enemies, and you can say, no problem at all. Here are some enemies, etc. And, we contacted Horizon because Horizon did a very nice program up until the last 10 minutes when they actually said, 100 drugs are in trial, but none of them work. And then there is nothing out there that reduces severity of respiratory infections, which of course is a lie because we already have, just to give you one tiny example, there are 6 what we call randomized controlled trials, which you can pull together to make a meta-analysis, which show that you get 25% less time spent on ventilators in studies that have used up to 6 grams of vitamin C, which is and this already exists. So the evidence is there. It's really quite extraordinary, and I smell a big rat, because at the end of the day, and what's happening, by the way, is vitamin C sales have gone through the roof. So the public know. I mean, it's not a great shock if you ask most people. They go, I went to visit. See, Nick Clegg was put in charge of all the fake news, information for Zuckerberg, Facebook, and he lives down the road. So I went to visit him, but he's in San Francisco. So I had a lovely chat with his mum, and her wisteria is looking fantastic. And I gave her a book and a letter, which she's absolutely promised that she will get to her son. We are approaching every possible person, and I have never known such an extraordinary lockdown.
Yeah.
And it just makes me think that they are kind of, I mean, you know, I don't want to get conspiratorial, but if this was not a fatal disease, if you knew how to protect people,
Mm.
and of course, the real answer, by the way, is to not get to that final stage, which I think is what would happen if you took high dose oral as soon as you get symptoms.
Yeah.
But if it was not a fatal disease, where would we be with the vaccine agenda? And, you know, people aren't idiots. That's where the money is.
Of course. Of
You
course.
know? And and the vaccine thing is kind of weird because in the 19th and 20th century, we had 14 viral epidemics that killed in the thousands. This 20 years of this century, we've had 11 already, you know, with swine flu and SARS and MERS and Ebola and whatever.
Yeah.
Not one of them have been solved by vaccines. I mean, the
No.
Ebola vaccine has been in development and safety trial now for 5 years. It's still not ready. So it's totally pie in the sky that you can produce a vaccine and test it safe. And of course, there's this total irony. I mean, when we were writing, you know, for the Mail, it was actually because Dr. Peng at Zhongnan University Hospital was doing a study. Everyone knew about this study. It's what we call a randomized placebo-controlled trial. So in his ICU unit, with patients on ventilators, in other words, at high risk of dying, one half were given intravenous vitamin C. It was actually 12 grams every 12 hours, so 24 grams a day. And the other half were given a drip, which contained sterile water. And the doctors didn't know which, and the patients didn't know which. That makes it double blind. So you are always told that you've got to prove it to me in a randomized placebo-controlled trial. And he was meant to do 140 patients in total, but he ran out of patients with a TA. They haven't had any for a month. So he called a press conference, and I was invited as a representative of the UK. And he gave the preliminary results, and which showed a 1/3 decreased death rate. So in the people taking vitamin C, 24% died, and remember in Britain it's 67%.
Yeah.
And reduction in inflammatory markers, reduction in time on mechanical ventilators. And the reason he called the meeting early, because normally, you know, in a non-critical situation, you get the thing published, you know, it's peer reviewed, and that whole process takes, you know, usually 3 months. But his judgment was, we don't have 3 months. We've run out of patients in China, and you've got loads of people dying in Europe and in America. So he was appealing to us to continue the trial in our ICU units, and therefore get enough numbers of people where you get enough statistical power and you can really be a lot more certain of what's going on. So that's why he sort of not leaked the results, but shared the results. And here's the irony: you have something like a vaccine, they're not even going to do a placebo-controlled trial.
No.
You know, it's total double standards, you know, one for vitamins and the other for vaccines. I mean, I'm not against vaccines, but if a vaccine is proved safe and if it's effective, but safe means a placebo-controlled randomized trial. I'm not.
I mean, I think the whole thing that, you know, hearing everything you're saying here, it just makes me realize that what we're focusing on all the time is this, you know, is the illness. We're not focusing on health at all. There's no focus on how we can take responsibility to start with, you know, for our own immunity and our own health and well-being. And really what you're talking about here is a way that everybody can do something that will not do them any harm, and it's highly likely it will do them some good. So
Yes.
are we saying then that people who have high, you know, decent levels of vitamin C are less likely to get it, or is that not possible to have any say over, as it were?
That is possible, but the strongest effect with vitamin C is to take 1 gram an hour when you get the first sign of the symptoms.
Right.
And actually, it's better to have a preloading dose of higher than that, like 2 to 5 grams straight away.
Yeah.
Your blood level goes high, then you take 1 gram an hour. The only downside of vitamin C is if you take more than you need, you get loose bowels. So if I took 1 gram an hour right now, because I'm not fighting an infection, there's no question I get loose bowels. But usually if you are fighting an infection, that doesn't happen. So we often say to people, take as much as you can tolerate.
Yeah.
But, I mean, the odd trip to the loo is not really a big deal if what you're doing is fighting an infection. But the question you ask is absolutely right. And in effect, it's the title. I mean, the book, the byline of Flu Fighters is How to Win the Cold War by Boosting Your Natural Immunity with Non-Toxic Nutrients. So when it started to appear that, the people with darker skin seemed to be more at risk and greater deaths, I mean, it's a no-brainer, isn't it? The darker your skin, the less vitamin D you make.
Exactly.
So now they've shown very clearly that people with a high level of vitamin D are much less likely to get into the acute severe stage of this virus, and people with a low level have much higher risk. The other no-brainer is it's actually killing 2 times as many men as women.
Yeah.
In Britain, we have 2 times as many diabetics in men than women.
Yeah.
And what a lot of people don't realize is that animals make vitamin C out of sugar, glucose. Vitamin C is very similar to glucose, and it actually uses exactly the same transport system into the blood. So diabetics and people who are eating lots of sugar are actually messing up their delivery system for vitamin C.
Right.
And a lot of the side effects of diabetes, a lot of the adverse effects are really terribly similar to the effects of not having enough vitamin C. And that's why vitamin C is actually extremely good for lowering blood sugar. Did you ever see Theresa May with a little white button, sort of pushed on her arm?
That was because she has diabetes, doesn't she?
Yeah. And there's this thing called a Freestyle Libre that GPs sometimes can give to their patients. And it allows you to measure. I mean, you literally put a meter against it and you can see your blood sugar, every 30 seconds if you wish. Now, that particular measuring device cannot differentiate between glucose and vitamin C.
Right.
So it's really interesting. So we've been running studies. These are in the book. You can see the graphs. So you can see exactly what happens if you have this type of vitamin C or that type of vitamin C, literally down to the minute. It's really interesting. And I think Linus Pauling, my teacher, spent 39 years on this, and he really discovered what we're saying now back in the late 70s, and he wrote it in a book. So this isn't the first time that vitamin C has been resisted. It's been resisted for a very long time because it is an incredibly powerful medicine. And honestly, I do not think the pharmaceutical industry, they are going to fight hammer and nail to make sure that we don't get this, because it's not good news for drugs and vaccines.
Absolutely.
That's the bottom line.
So you mentioned vitamin D there. So just before we go on to talk about vitamin C, let's just talk about vitamin D, because of course that, as you say, is also incredibly important. I'm pretty sure you and I may have had a conversation in the past about how I discovered that, I've interviewed you before, and I discovered how unbelievably low I was. I hadn't realized. I just had a generic kind of well-being test, and one of the tests they did was for vitamin D, and I was absolutely shocked to the core that my levels were at 12.
Yeah.
Oh my God, it's amazing I was alive, isn't it, really, when I look back? And suddenly it dawned on me that I'd been keeping out of the sun always, as a fair-skinned person, constantly covering up, always being in the shade, clearly not eating, the right foods, and definitely not supplementing. So, I got my act together back then. I'm so grateful I did. But I think there's a huge issue there, because people just don't realize how much vitamin D they need. And then when the sun does come out, and the rare, we've been lucky for a few weeks, but in this country, usually anywhere in the Northern Hemisphere, often, we have months and months of it being grey and miserable. And then the sun does come out and everyone slaps on sun cream and still doesn't absorb any. So just tell us, what, in your experience, what can we do there?
Okay, the first thing is that, a third of the British population by February have a level below 30.
Wow.
So you're in acute deficiency.
Yeah.
The very, at the very least, you have to be above 50 to be not in the sort of deficient category.
Yeah, exactly.
And most people say you should be above 75, but we're actually now learning that you really want to have a blood level above 100 for optimal immune protection. Now, I was in Kenya for most of January, or mid-Jan to mid-Feb, with lots of sun exposure. And also I do supplement vitamin D in my multivitamin, a reasonably decent amount, 600 IUs, 15 micrograms. And, you know, even I, as an optimum nutrition enthusiast, and I was eating fish because fish is quite a good source of vitamin D. So I figured I'm going to get myself tested when I get home. And I'm sure I'll be, you know, I'll be up there and at least above 75 and hopefully 100. I was 65. So I wasn't deficient, but it really showed me just how much we do really need.
Yeah.
And I, at the very least, everyone should be supplementing 1,000 IUs or 25 micrograms through, you know, really from October through to end of March.
1,000 IUs a day.
1,000 IUs a day. But
and would you recommend that in supplement form or a spray or?
Doesn't matter.
No. Okay.
You know, it's fine. You can get drops, capsules, whatever.
Because diet doesn't really cut it, does it? You can't really get in.
No. I mean, you get a little bit from oily fish and eggs and whatever, but you know, it's enough to stop you getting rickets, you know, but it's not enough to really boost your immune system. And what's become very clear is the higher your level, the more immune protection you have. And of course, you know, we're all very, very acutely aware of that.
Yeah.
When I say take 1,000 IUs, I'll tell you about 2 studies which are in the book. Because in these studies, they had people with pneumonia. And by the way, people who die of scurvy die of pneumonia, which is a lung disease, which is effectively what this COVID is doing. It's very, very similar. And in this study, they gave people with pneumonia in a sort of life-threatening condition. They didn't give them 1,000 IUs. They didn't give them 5,000 IUs. They didn't give them 50,000 IUs. They gave them 500,000 IUs, right?
Wow.
So I'm talking 500 times what I've just told you to take on a daily basis in the winter, over 5 days. So, you know, 100,000 a day for 5 days. And what they showed was 2 things. One is statistically, they halved their number of hospital days. In other words, they got better twice as fast, and decreased time on ventilators, ICU, and all the rest of it. And they got their deficient blood level, they were all below 30, up to about 100 to 120 in 5 days.
Yeah.
So unlike vitamin C, which doesn't store, and you have to get it hour by hour when you're fighting an infection, vitamin D does store. It probably doesn't have any benefit taking it, you know, hour by hour. All you need to make sure is that if you're fighting an infection, that your blood level is high enough. Now, of course, you might not know that. Honestly, I think we all should test every now and again just to know where we are.
Yeah.
But, you know, there's absolutely no harm in taking for a short period of time a very high dose to just, you know, really give your vitamin D level a boost.
Yeah, definitely.
So I think vitamin D is very, very important. And I also learned, and I didn't know this, I mean, is that some people over the age of 80 are actually producing 2/3 less vitamin D in the skin. So the older you get, the less efficient you are at making vitamin D. Overweight people are less efficient at making vitamin D and as you say, get outdoors. It's terribly easy not to, and expose as much of your skin as you can without getting arrested. Because, you know, if you take your t-shirt off, or, you know, have a t-shirt on with your arms, or have shorts, or, you know, every you know, square inch of flesh exposed is a vitamin C making factory. Yeah,
definitely. So let's go back to vitamin C then. So what can people do themselves? I mean, we know it's really clear that if you get sick, you need, you know, very high doses. I mean, sadly, in this country, we're not going to be allowed intravenous vitamin C.
It's happening.
Is it?
There's one ICU that is doing it, not yet at the right dose. I think it will happen. I don't think we'll know about it. I think it will happen internally.
Okay.
Gradually happen.
Good.
Without any admission of, you know, whatever.
Yeah, but meanwhile, what can the individual do? You know, if you're not already on decent doses, what type is important. I've heard that, you know, some doctors believe that liposomal vitamin C is better. What's your view, and exactly how much and how often should we take it?
Well, first of all, I mean, gorillas eat 4.5 grams. Linus, right, that's what they eat in a day. London Zoo gorillas are fed 2 grams of supplemental vitamin C every day.
Yeah.
Linus Pauling worked out that he wanted the RDA to be 2 grams.
Yeah.
That's what I take every day. I take
Okay.
a gram in the morning and I take a gram in the afternoon.
In what form do you take it?
Ascorbic acid.
Right. Okay.
Ascorbic acid, there's a confusion here. People think it's synthetic, and it is. It's made in a lab from sugar, effectively, which is exactly how animals make it. So, and it goes through exactly the same process. We lack one functioning step of the process. We lost it. And I'll tell you something really interesting about that in a minute. And so animals synthesize it from glucose and laboratories synthesize it from glucose. It is what our body is totally used to. It actually absorbs in the stomach very, very fast. There is another form where you make it less acidic and more alkaline by attaching the vitamin C to a mineral, which is called an ascorbate, like sodium ascorbate, potassium ascorbate. And it's often called buffered because it means it's less acidic. Some people think they can tolerate it better, but it's not really clear that that's the case. To be honest, a lot of people, if someone gets any digestive gastrointestinal effects from vitamin C, it's usually because they are under producing stomach acid. And if you take it with some citrus fruit juice, or you put a little bit of cider vinegar in a glass of water, and you basically increase the acidity, you may find that you don't get any effects at all. I mean, it's very interesting that nature puts the most vitamin C into the most acid fruit.
Yeah. Well, of course, that was going to be my next question. Wouldn't it be better then if we could get enough, citrus, as it were, vitamin C? Wouldn't it be better to have this directly from food, or is it that we just simply can't eat enough, lemons and God knows what, and broccoli?
Yeah, I mean, we really can't eat enough. That's really, I mean, our species and all primates have this problem. We cannot produce vitamin C, and it makes us susceptible to viral diseases. And of course, if we did eat, 250 oranges, we get fat because we don't need all the sugar. So it's one nutrient that we really do need to make. I have a podcast, and there's a website called flufighters.net. And there's a ton of information in there. There's a film you have to see, because I've actually filmed the guys in China and America and the whole story. And you'll see the truck leaving with 50 tons of this. I mean, everything I'm saying sounds almost, too good to be true. But when you see this 5-minute film called How Vitamin C Won the Cold War, every single, it's like the logic is just impeccable. And so last week I interviewed on Tuesday Professor Paul Marek, who's telling us what's happening in ICUs. And another lovely Dr. Anton, who uses intravenous vitamin C in South Africa. And he actually told me a story. He didn't tell me this on the air, but a farmer, watched him on YouTube talking about vitamin C. He had horses who were dying from a virus. So there are some viruses that do affect animals that make vitamin C, well, African horse disease, or whatever it is. And they die on the 8th day, and there's nothing you can do. So he happened to have some ascorbic acid in his sort of agricultural medical toolkit. So he decided to just boil up some hot water and dissolve it in 6 grams of vitamin C, gave his horses an injection every morning of 6 grams of vitamin C, and they didn't die. They came back to life.
Wow.
It's quite a remarkable thing. And then, so yes, lots of podcasts. Next week, on Tuesday, I interview a fascinating man called Thomas Levy, Dr. Thomas Levy, who wrote a book cataloging. There is simply no viral disease, none at all, from HIV to Ebola, you name it, measles, whatever, even polio, that has been tested against vitamin C, where vitamin C hasn't worked.
Wow.
And this guy, he really knows his stuff. You mentioned liposomal vitamin C. Now, by the way, you can get liposomal ascorbic acid, which I would prefer, or liposomal ascorbate, which I would think is not necessarily so good. And liposome means it's wrapped in a fat, so it doesn't have to be transported through the normal channels. It actually is absorbed like a fat. And it It does raise blood levels a bit more, so it's perfectly good. I have no problem with it at all. Other than the fact, and this is the reality, it's 3 times the price. And personally, if I want to get one of my clients' vitamin C levels really, 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 really high, I will give a cheaper ascorbic acid.
So when you say you'll give ascorbic acid, do you mean you'll physically give them powder to put in water,
Doesn't
ascorbic
matter.
acid, or is it a supplement?
A supplement. I mean, I have to sort of declare an interest here because I have formulated supplements the company made, so I get a little percentage on that. So I'm declaring my commercial interest. My product's called Immune C, and to sort of understand the logic of it, it has both ascorbic acid and zinc. Not very much zinc, just 3 milligrams per pill, plus elderberry extract, because black elderberry, especially in the early stages of an infection, is very excellent. And it has some ginger. Now, what we know about zinc is that basically zinc is incredibly effective at killing viruses. But once you get above 50, ideally 60 or 70 milligrams. So, for example, Professor Paul Marek gives his patients high dose zinc, not for long. You could do it for 5 days, a week, or even 2 weeks. You don't need that much on a daily basis. But short term, it's very, very good. And what happens, the reason why my immune Cs are like this is that if I do take one, every hour, let's say I have 20 in a day, so I'm getting 20 grams, I'm also getting 20 times 3 milligrams, in other words, 60 milligrams of zinc. So I've worked it out that if I normally take just 2 a day, but if I do crank up the dose, I'm getting to a very, very good place. And we've also, we're learning so much. Zinc kills viruses, but the big problem is you can't get it in to cells. And they've now discovered there are 2 things that carry zinc inside a virally infected cell. And one is the drug you might have heard of, the malaria drug, hydroxychloroquine. Even though it's got some pretty nasty side effects, it actually gets zinc inside cells. And by the way, both malaria and the COVID-19 virus attack hemoglobin, which is your red blood cell that carries oxygen. So in effect, you end up starving of oxygen and unable to breathe. The other thing that does it, which you might have heard of, is a natural, wonderful substance called quercetin. And quercetin is in red onions. So I like to have a red onion every day, and that's about 20 milligrams of quercetin. But really to get an effect with quercetin, and it's fantastic for the respiratory system, you need about 500 milligrams. So you need to supplement it. But that makes zinc work better. And the point is, the book teaches you exactly what you need to know, because if you believe in vaccines, you believe in the immune system, because a vaccine won't work unless your immune system is fully firing. And that, by the way, is why, last year the flu vaccine was really effective. It was 20% effective in people over 75. The year before it was 10% effective. So older people with less functioning immune systems get less response to a vaccine. So the big elephant in the room, if you believe in vaccines, you believe in your immune system, but no one is talking about how to support your own immunity. It's a no-brainer. It's not a vaccine or vitamin story. The stronger your immunity is, it would make you respond much better to a vaccine as well. And that's the question we have to ask. Why is it that, what we now know out of China as well is you can be exposed to this virus, have absolutely no symptoms at all, develop the antibodies, and not infect anybody else. That can occur. Then there's a group of people who get a very minor problem. Then there are others who, suffer for a week and get over it. And we're now up to about 90% of the population. And then you've got this last 10%. Who really struggle. And the question we should ask is, what's different about the people who get clobbered to the people who don't? And I'm sure when the work is really done, it will be down to things like low vitamin D levels, low vitamin C levels, diabetes, overweight, you know, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I could talk to you for hours, Patrick, but we'll leave it at that. So obviously the book is available, Flu Fighters. That's fantastic. And if you just want to give us a website where people can find more information, that would be great.
Yes, go to flufighters.net. Definitely look at this film called How to Win the Cold War. And please also click on the link to our campaign, which is called C4UK, and sign the petition. There's tons of useful information in there. And there's also a free chapter 9, which is called Surviving Respiratory Distress. And that's a kind of life-saving chapter. So we've made it free. You can download it, send it to everyone you like. Do spread the word. We are not allowed on Facebook to say anything more on vitamin C. We have been banned. We've had 8 yellow flags. So we're literally not allowed to say anything anymore.
I mean, there's something very weird about that, isn't there? How weird is that?
Absolutely weird. And you know, so I've got like a free e-news, because we're now moving everyone off Facebook to join the e-news, because it's the only way I can keep communicating with people. Listen to the podcast. It's a fascinating area. I think we're all going to come out of this a lot healthier, a lot more aware about nutrition.
I really hope so. I really hope that's what will happen, that people will really wake up to taking some responsibility, doing their own research, and finding how they can really look to optimum health and well-being. That will be amazing, won't it?
I think we're going to look back at this and we will just be appalled at how badly the whole thing has been bungled.
Yeah. Thank you, Patrick. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Great to speak with you.